Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my final Hunter x Hunter Chimera Ant arc review video. Um, Obviously, there is still one more arc after this I will be reviewing as I experienced Hunter x Hunter through the 2011 anime. So there's still one more arc to go in terms of these reviews, but this is the final one for the Chimera Ant arc. The fifth one specifically, and it's been a ride getting these recorded and uploaded and everything. Taken it's taken time, but to be fair, it took quite a bit of time just to be able to um, get everything up in the first place, to watch the series and everything. So even before the Chimera Ant arc, and that's just how it goes with how many episodes the series has. Over 100, so yeah. But like I said, today we are talking about the final, what I would say, act of the Chimera Ant arc. Of the five separate acts, the five separate, very clearly distinguishable sections of this arc. We now move on to the final one, and this covers, in the 2011 anime, episodes 128 to 136, closing out the series after the events of the palace invasion and everything. So, last we left off, Poof and Yuppie had just arrived at where the king, Meruem, had been fighting Netero. In the aftermath of that, Poof and Yuppie found Meruem's charred corpse after the effects of the miniature rose bomb that Netero set off to kill the king and sacrifice himself in doing so. So at the start of this section, at the start of this act, Poof and Yuppie, I don't know why that sounded weird to me. Poof, well, it's kind of silly sounding in general. But Poof and Yuppie sacrifice their own flesh and life force to Meruem, uh, which brings him back to life. And I mean, we say that he was very clearly gonna die, but he technically wasn't dead yet. He was holding on. Um, they bring him back from the brink of death, let's put it that way, and stronger than ever because he was brought back using the life force and everything um, of his royal guard. He's stronger than ever. He has a psychic link to both Poof and Yuppie, and he's much more of a threat than he had been before. Um, During this, though, we find out that he has a little bit of amnesia. He remembers who his royal guard are, he remembers who he is, but there's certain little things from the recent past that he can't seem to recall. One of these things we find out is Komugi. And Poof likes this because Poof never liked Komugi. Poof always thought that Komugi was a hindrance to the king, that she was keeping him from doing his job, basically. um, so Poof sets out a plan to secretly kill Komugi using his ability to break off into little like drones of himself before the king can remember her. Also cleaning up and hiding any kind of just hint of the Goongi game as well, because Miriam doesn't seem to remember that either. Um, During this, we have Palm finding out about the king's survival. And so Killua is trying to protect Komugi and everything. Poof does eventually get to him, though, and tries to trick Komugi into thinking that Killua and them are the bad guys, just so she'll fight back and make it so that Poof can kill her. Killua realizes this, though, and manages to protect her while getting her away and admittedly knocking her out. So she stops struggling and fighting. Because she does fall for it, because she recognizes Poof's voice. And with her strong connection to Meruem, she believes and trusts in him, as bad as that is. Like, there's not really a reason for her to trust Poof, but because she trusts the king, and she knows that Poof is with the king, she trusts Poof by extension. I love Kamugi so much, but you can't argue that she's a little naive. You can't. Um, but it doesn't make her a bad person or anything. It just means she's naive. She doesn't understand what's actually going on here. Um, Meanwhile, Gon and Pito arrive at Kite's location, and Pito reveals to Gon that Kite is dead, that he died during their fight way back when, and that she had basically just been controlling his body like a puppet. Now, this is stuff we already knew as the audience. We were already given this information. Gon did not know, though. So this reveal is specifically for Gon and to see how he reacts to it. And he breaks down. He has a complete mental breakdown at this point because he was so invested in the belief that Kite could be brought back. And he had given Pito the benefit of the doubt because she agreed to go with him and everything to fix Kite after healing Komugi. So there's the issue in itself. Gon is realizing that Pito lied, or at least tricked him, or however you want to put it. So Pito blatantly tells Gon that they plan to kill him. Gon doesn't take this well. Gon goes psycho mode. And this is a part that I did know about prior to watching the series because I've just happened to see this form in various places, like through social media and whatnot, pictures and whatnot. And so I've seen this form before. Well, before I started the series, I knew that this was coming. I didn't know how strong exactly it was, though. I knew it was strong. I just didn't know how strong this form was. So Pito realizes that Gon is creating this, I guess you could call it more adult-like form, because his body is more adult. Like, he kind of turns into a JoJo character, let's be honest. But Pito realizes that to do this, Gon has to use his own life force. He's basically sapping away at his life in order to give himself a massive Nen boost. Um, so Pito plans to take him out as quickly as possible, realizing that with this power, Gon is at least on par with the king. Killua manages to get to Gon, having dropped off Komugi, right as he murderizes Pito. Pito just was completely outmatched here. It was a completely one-sided fight. And Gon obliterates them, just destroys Pito. And this part kind of left me a little conflicted because I like Pito. Pito is one of my favorite villains in the series, if not my favorite villain in this series. They're far more interesting than Meruem could ever be. They're far more entertaining and fun to watch than Meruem could ever be. Just being honest. And honestly, they left more of an impact with their debut than Meruem did for me. And ever since, like, pretty much at all times Pito was on screen, I was enjoying their character. And so it's kind of sad to see them die, but I also expected it. I expected this to happen. I expected Pito, Poof, and Yuppie to all die. And so it's like, I'm not surprised. I'm a little sad, but I'm not like actually upset. And I'm more in shock out of everything that happened than anything. So just Gon has completely obliterated them. And in a one final act of desperation, Pito, the remains of Pito's body basically takes off Gon's arm, but is finished off and everything. So, yeah, Gon kind of passes out and things aren't looking great in that regard. um, Meruem, meanwhile, back at the palace, detects the presence of both Knuckle and Melioron and knocks them out. Palm and Ikalgo hide Komugi in the bunker, the underground bunker where Palm had been taken when she was infiltrating and everything. And Poof is trying to convince Meruem to make a game of finding the intruders to kind of buy time and whatnot. Um, Miriam does agree, but only under certain conditions, one of which being if Poof and Yuppie lose, then they have to tell him, Miriam, what they've been hiding from him. Because Miriam can tell they've been hiding stuff. He doesn't know what it is, but he can tell they've been hiding stuff from him. And it's not making him happy that Poof and Yuppie are doing this. So, um, during this, Ikalgo confronts Welfin, the wolf chimera ant who we've seen before is extremely paranoid. And we've seen these two confront each other before. Um, they talk about how they were both Gyro's men in their former life. And Welfin relays a message from Ikalgo to Yuppie. But at the same time, it looks like him and Yuppie end up getting ready to fight each other due to kind of Welfin going out of control and just being himself. Uh, but we basically cut at that point to Poof finding Yuppie dead. And my first thought is like, no fucking way Welfin did that. Like, I'm not saying that Welfin can't be strong, but Welfin would not be able to kill Yuppie. He's not that strong. Um, but it's soon revealed that Meruem was poisoned by the miniature rose. That it's not just a massive bomb, but it also poisons anyone within a certain radius of it during the explosion. And that poison is contagious as well. So we realize that Yuppie was poisoned through his contact with Meruem, and that's why he died. It wasn't Welfin. And this also means that Poof is infected. But the biggest thing, obviously, that this means is that Meruem is slowly dying. The poison is taking effect of his body, but because of how strong he is, he's able to withstand it longer than either of his royal guard would be. Um, so Meruem attacks Welfin, but Welfin reminds him of Komugi, kind of by desperation. And because of this, Meruem stops and goes off to find Komugi. Shortly after this, after finding out that what Poof had been hiding and everything, Poof also dies from the exposure. Kind of very offhandedly too, like, and it works for him because he had such this grandiose personality, this wanting to be like noticed and given attention from Miriam, and he dies kind of just offhandedly. It's like, oh yeah, he died too. That's kind of how it felt. But it so works for his character, for his personality. It's a fitting end for him, honestly. Um, but yeah, Miriam at this point has accepted that he's going to die. He's not sad about it. He's not angry about it. He's accepted it, and it's not even like a sad acceptance thing. It's just like he understands that Netero beat him without question. Netero defeated him unequivocally and completely. So he asks Palm, Miriam goes to Palm and asks her to reveal Komugi's location for him. He wants to spend his final moments with Komugi. And admittedly, this is a part that got me a little emotional. It didn't make me full out cry, but it got me pretty emotional. And it's honestly because of what Komugi had said in the past about Miriam being the first person to ever show her love, like real, genuine love, to ever care about her as much as he had. So the fact that in the end, knowing he's dying, Miriam wants to do nothing more than spend his final moments with her, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And so Palm agrees to it. She tells him where Komugi has been hidden, and he goes to her. He wants to play Gungi with her again, one last time. Komugi, he tells her about him dying and all, and she understands. She even understands that if she stays with him, she'll die, but she chooses to do so anyway. Having been given love, having been given just a reason to keep going for a time, when she felt she was a screw up, a waste of space, and couldn't do anything for anyone. Being given that hope from Miriam and just playing Gungi over and over with him again, the one thing that she is good at, it made her life worth living. So she was happy to end it with him. And so they die, holding on to each other out of what can be described as nothing short of true love. They die. And this is a part I don't know if I touched on before, but I want to touch on it here. Komugi's age is contested amongst fans because it's not confirmed anywhere. Um, some people see her as being younger, but I I see her as being a young adult. Her size, body shape, all that does not matter. That does not at all matter. Um, because we have like honestly, she's not too far off from like what Bisky looks like, I guess you could say. And Bisky we know is like 50 something years old, I think, 50 something. Um, and granted, it's a Nen ability making her look that young and cutesy because she doesn't like the way she normally looks. But you even have other adult characters who are smaller in stature and everything, like Melody. And again, Melody was cursed by that piece of music, the devil's piece of music, whatever it's exactly called. But again, still, I think it just cursed her physical like appearance, not so much her size. Um, but the point is, from what we know of Komugi, she was a Gungi prodigy who was a champion for 10 years. And she was a prodigy before that and everything. So it's like, we know that she's been competing in Gungi on the professional level for over 10 years. And yeah, prodigies usually start out pretty young in a lot of cases. But I cannot see her as any less than honestly 19 or 20 years old. Based on everything we've learned about her and everything with her Gungi skills and being a prodigy and just her history with Gungi that we've learned about, I don't see it being I don't see her being that young. That's ridiculously young prior to those 10 years. I would say she was probably like 8, 9, or 10, somewhere between 8 and 10. 8 at the absolute youngest, which would make her at least 18, but more than likely a little older. So I think that she's somewhere between 19 and 21, somewhere in that range. And even so, like, Merum is clearly meant to be, like, in terms of intellect and whatnot, and the way he presents himself and all, he's meant to be like an adult. But technically, he's only, like, what, a couple months old by this point in the series? So it's like, it, it's a really weird situation either way. But the point is, their love doesn't feel weird or unnatural outside of, him being a chimera ant. It doesn't feel like it has like any kind of negative implications in that regard. Because again, in my eyes, Komugi never felt like a kid. Just because she is very childlike in her personality and stuff doesn't make her a kid. A lot of adults are like that. A lot of them. So it's like just trying to use the excuse that she's very childlike in personality and stuff doesn't really work. And I've even heard some people say, like, oh, she kind of implies that she still lives with her family and stuff. And it's like, she's blind, right? She's literally handicapped. That's not an excuse either. Of course, she's going to live with someone who can take care of her. Like, yeah, blind people can do a lot to take care of themselves, but they're blind. They have a disability that requires at least a little bit of help just to function through everyday life. And so it's like, yeah, if she lives with her family, fine. That doesn't, again, invalidate the idea that she's an adult. Plus, there's just a lot of adults who do still live with their families. That's not as uncommon as people think it is, especially in the more recent years. So, the idea of her being an adult here, it's just, in my eyes, it's undeniable. And so, I've never had an issue with the idea of Meryl and her being romantically connected, of them loving each other. And even though it never outright says it or shows them kiss or anything like that, it's very clear that they love each other. And it's very clear that it's in a kind of romantic sense. I mean, you could say it's more like a codependent sense, like they just really value each other so much that they can't see themselves without each other. But it definitely came across to me as a romantic sense, to be honest. Anywho, so like I said, both of them end up dying, holding on to each other. as they do. And it's really fucking sad, and it made me cry because I didn't want Komugi to die. Because Komugi is definitely one of my favorite characters in this series, without question. I mean, she took a villain who, let's be honest, was kind of boring, very generic, and she actually made him interesting. Komugi made Meruem interesting. Without Komugi, Meruem would have been honestly one of the weakest, if not the weakest villain in this series so far, as of this point. Um, he was so generic, so bland. It's like, oh, I'm strong. I have to be strong. I have to rule. It's like, whoop de doo. You're strong. You're a little scary. That's all you are. I have seen hundreds of other villains exactly like that. Strong, a bit scary, wants to rule over others, kind of stoic and everything. The only thing he really had going for him was the fact that he had to learn all this information and was kind of had this natural curiosity because of that. That's really the only thing that separated him from a lot of these other villains like this. But once Komugi came into play and started changing him, that's when he became interesting. That's when he actually became a more unique, fascinating, and entertaining character. And even despite this, I still don't see him as that great of a villain altogether. Because once he started getting changed, it's like he stopped being as villainous in general as he was. Honestly, by the end of this, I really didn't see him as much of a villain at all. I kind of saw him as neutral, as this kind of neutral party. Poof and Yuppie and Pito were more of actual villains by the end. And not even Pito as much. Poof was honestly the biggest villain of this arc, considering, by the end. He was the one who stayed and remained villainous the entire time, and even became more so. So it's just like, it's wild to me that so many people I've seen rave over Meruem, and it's like, why? It's like, yes, he becomes more interesting thanks to Komugi, but he's still not that great. I wouldn't put him in my top 10 characters of the series. I don't understand why people like are so obsessed with him. Anywho, now that all of that is done, the king is dead, the royal guards are dead, and everything, we kind of get the aftermath of all of this. The public is being kept unaware of the events of this arc, basically, um, just as a method of not starting panic or any kind of issues in regards to that. And the Hunter Association puts out this video pre-recorded by Netero to announce his retirement. And I say that with quotes, retirement. He knew when he recorded that video that it would only be released upon his death. And so the announcement's made that the Hunter Association will be electing a new chairman in his place, while continuing to hide the fact that Netero is dead, not retired. Um, Meanwhile, the surviving Chimera ants, without any kind of orders or anything really to do, and a lot of them being nicer, just kind of move on with their lives and, well, make lives in the world at large now. Um, and then we get the part that actually made me cry harder than any other part of this series. And it came out of fucking nowhere, and it made me upset because it came out of nowhere. Um, Blaster, the lobster dude, takes this cute little ant Shidore, who was working with the human-like ant who had the hat and everything. I don't remember her name, but the girl ant who was very cutesy and everything. But Shidori was working with her briefly. But Blaster takes her to the village that she lived in when she was a girl. Shidori is Reina, the young girl we met at the beginning of the Chimera Ant arc, who was killed by the ants along with her brother Kurt. And we know Kurt became Colt, one of the first Chimera ants that we really became accustomed and connected to. And so we now finally know who Reina became. And I had thought it was like the little baby that Colt managed to rescue from the queen's womb after her death. But no, that comes into play later. We find out more about that later. Um, this one, Shidore, who has like the physical appearance of like this shy, cutesy little girl with a normal looking ant head. Like she's not like any other animal, she's just an ant. um, but she stands up like on two legs and everything like a human and all. But they arrive at the village where she was living when she was human with her brother Kurt and her mom. And she goes to her mom's house and very shyly, very scared, she approaches and reunites with her mother, who recognizes her instantly and embraces and accepts her despite her changes, despite her being a Chimera ant now. Reina starts crying, asking her mother how she could recognize her. And she just basically says, "I'm your mother, of course I recognize you." And this broke me. Like, I thought Komugi's death and everything with Miriam would have broken me harder, and that did break me. That made me cry, very much so. But this one broke me. This one destroyed me because that's it's what this arc began with. That was the big turning point when we saw these two kids brutally murdered. And we find out pretty quickly that Colt is Kurt and everything. We wondered what happened to Reina. Like, is she an ant as well? And we don't get these answers. This arc is so long, we don't get the answers until the very end. And Reina gets reunited with her mother, and it is the just fucking happiest thing that's happened in a long time in this series. So having that big burst of happiness, of joy, of relief hit you all at once after everything else that happened in this arc. It overwhelmed me. And it's like a dam with water pressure building up behind it just suddenly burst. And the valley got flooded. And by that I mean the tears exploded out. I lost it. I actually had to pause. I'm watching along. I was watching along with Rough Senpai's videos on his Patreon. I had to pause the video because I was crying so hard at that. It affected me that much, and it's like just, uh, I'm even starting to cry right now just thinking about it. And she just accepts her, and the rest of the village who knew Reina and everything accepts her as well. And what Blaster's gonna leave at first and everything, but Reina wants him to join her at the village, and they all accept him too. And it's just like, I love it so much. And I don't even care much about Blaster. It's like we've never been given a lot of reason to care about Blaster. But because of Shidore, because of Reina and her connection and everything that had just happened with her reuniting with her mom, after everything that happened in this arc, it's like yeah, you kind of want Gloucester to find happiness here too. And so it's like, that gets you as well, just not as much. Um, yeah, it was a lot. Colt then calls Moral, who I am so happy survived. I was worried there a couple times. I was thinking he was going to die, but I'm so happy he survived. I really do like Moral. Colt calls him to tell him what he found out about the Queen's final child, the one he rescued from the womb and all, who was just this tiny little thing, and who he's been raising this entire time, which is why he's not really been involved in a lot for the second half of this arc. Um, he tells Moral that the child won't accept the name that he's given her, and that she refuses to be called by anything else than a specific name. And then it shows her like rambunctiously calling out that her name is Kite. Kite was reborn as a Chimera ant, just like Reyna, just like Kurt, and so many others. And so, after all of this, Kite is alive, after all. If only Gon had known about this before, because Gon is on the verge of death. He is beyond fucked up. It's really fucking bad. And Killua has a plan for that. He has a plan to help heal Gon, but of course, we're not allowed to know what it is yet. And this arc ends with the arrival of the Zodiacs at the Hunter Association. The Zodiacs are the top members of the association who are beginning to assemble in order to facilitate the election that will determine the next chairman. And one of the Zodiacs is Jing Freaks, Gon's father. And that's how the arc ends, with that revelation, with Jing coming to the Hunter Association. So, overall thoughts on the Chimera Ant arc as a whole, now that we have finished reviewing it. This arc is proclaimed by many to be one of the greatest arcs in anime. Not just shonen anime, not just Hunter x Hunter, but all of anime. A lot of people consider it to be one of the greatest stories told in anime. And truly believe that it's unparalleled. From the villains to the pacing to just the intensity and everything. And I honestly disagree drastically. The Chimera Ant arc was very, very good. Great, even. But people over exaggerate shit like crazy. Meruem was not that great of a villain, all things considered. Even with being amped up by Komugi and becoming more interesting because of Komugi, he's still not the best villain in the series. The Phantom Troop alone, any of them, has him beat. Illumi and Hisoka have him beat. And on top of that, yes, this arc got a lot more intense and dark and scary and horrific in some cases. But that alone doesn't make this better. Just because it got darker doesn't mean it's better. It just means it's darker. And I like dark stuff in anime, so this would be something I like, and I do like it. I love what they did with this. But again, it's like that doesn't just make this better than other arcs in the series or in anime in general. And there were parts of it that honestly disappointed me. There were parts of it that bored me because of how long it dragged on. And it dragged a lot. This arc easily could have been cut in half. Easily. They could have cut out so much. They could have paced it better. Um, it was dragged on so heavily. And while I still loved it and it was still great, it definitely felt like it was weakened because of that. Compared to other arcs which felt much better paced. The York New City arc, the Greed Island arc, um, Hunter exam arc, all of those felt much better paced than this one. This arc also had a shit ton of characters. Honestly, too many new characters. There were too many ants to try and remember them all. And even non-ant characters. It's like sometimes it's like you're trying to remember everyone and get through everyone, and it's just like there's just too much. There's too many new characters added in. But because it's so long, it kind of like has to in a way. Or at least that's what it feels like Togashi probably was thinking. I don't know. It's just like not all the characters really had a chance to truly shine. Like even characters who were given opportunities in the spotlight and everything never truly shined as characters. Yuppie, for example, honestly did nothing for me. Yuppie never really got a chance to become something special as a character. Poof did, Pito did, but Yuppie never did. Nove never really got a chance to shine. In fact, they kind of took him out of commission for a bit. And the way they brought him back and having him work to overcome his fears was kind of cool. But he felt so less important than Moral, Knuckle, Shoot, and so many others in this arc. Palm, after her resurrection and everything as a Chimera Ant, was pretty much relegated to a spy, using her powers to spy on the opponents occasionally. That's it. She didn't have much of any other use at that point. So it's like she didn't even feel like she was a worthwhile character. And considering where she started out and everything, as kind of a creeper, going after a kid 10 years younger than her, it's just like there was not really a lot to love about her. And that's the thing, these characters could have been given more. These characters could have been built up better and developed better, but they weren't. And there's an insane amount of Chimera Ants you could say this about. There's only a handful of Chimera Ants that actually felt like they mattered. Outside of the King and the Royal Guards, of course. I'm just talking about the other Chimera Ants. There's like very small amount. And that's a big issue with how long this was and everything. And it just felt like kind of a lot of it was just wasted time. And I don't know if this arc was as long as it was because of Togashi's health condition. I don't know if he kept pushing to continue it because of that or whatnot, but yeah, and if that's the case, I understand. And I don't say that Togashi's wrong for doing that. I'm just saying that I personally didn't enjoy this arc as much as I could have because of that. I want to make that clear. It's a personal taste kind of thing. I'm not just nagging on Togashi. I'm not just hating on him for his writing here. For me personally, it just didn't work as well. And then you could even say that the actual invasion part, with the fact that a lot of it, a very good portion of it, took place with only like a matter of a few minutes, basically. You could even talk about how horribly paced that kind of thing is. And it's like, yeah, other anime and stuff have done this. Dragon Ball did this with Frieza and everything. It's like, yes, but that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it better. It's still bad. It's still bad pacing. It just it drags so heavily when you do that. And it feels like you're literally just trying to drag things on further rather than tell an engaging, well thought out story. And again, I'm not trying to say this as a nag on Tagashi. I'm literally just saying this as a personal preference for me. I don't like when things are paced out like that, when they're dragged out that heavily. It's not my kind of thing, and it bothers me. It takes away a lot of the entertainment value for me. Um, but in the end, I did still enjoy this arc very much. There was still a lot to love about it, Komugi. Um, and there was some great action scenes, some really fun trickery from various characters. Pito was fantastic. Loved them. Miriam got better because of Komugi, but could have still been more interesting. And just so many other characters were introduced that I really loved, like Knuckle and Moral. So that there was definitely a lot to love. Plus, again, this arc did make me cry heavily with both the death of Miriam and Komugi and the death and Reina reuniting with her mother. So there is that, and I do actually like it when shows make me cry because it means that it's doing something right, getting me all emotional. Um, but yeah, so now that the Chimera Ant arc is done, we only have one arc to go in the 2011 anime, so only one more arc to review. Um, and that is the final arc. I don't actually have the numbers listed, so I might have to look this up real quick. Um, Hold on. Yeah, I can look this up. But the final arc is the chairman selection arc. Um, Election, not selection. The chairman election arc, or the full title is the 13th Hunter chairman election arc. It is the final arc of the 2011 anime, and it's episodes 137 to 148. This, unlike the Chimera Ant arc, since it's only like 11 episodes, will be one video. I only need to talk about it in one video. And by the point I'm recording this, I have already finished the series. So I've already seen this arc. And I will say that it's going to be interesting to talk about. And there's going to be a few separated sections that I feel would be best to talk about in this way. Um, and I'm going to say right now, I'm not going to continue these reviews with the manga because even though there is an entire other arc finished in the manga, I'm not a manga reader. I've talked about this before. I'm not a fan of the medium. So I just I don't want to read any further. I apologize for any of you who would have loved to hear my thoughts on further stuff, but unless it eventually gets animated, it's not going to happen. But I will be reacting to at some point the second of the Hunter x Hunter movies. Um, Now that I finished the 2011 series, I can watch the second movie. Though I think I could actually have watched it earlier than this, but still, better to finish the series, you know? So that will be coming some point in the future. Um, but yeah, so either way, I enjoyed this arc very much, but it did have its issues, and it's not my favorite. So tell me your thoughts on this section of the Chimera Ant arc, which is episodes 128 to 136, the end of the Chimera Ant arc, basically, as I call it. And tell me what you thought of the arc as a whole. I understand that my opinion on this and everything is pretty unpopular because I know how people tend to view this arc. But at the same time, it's like it's my opinion, man. I'm I'm entitled to it. I'm allowed to have whatever opinions I have from my own experiences. So, yeah. But yeah, tell me in the comments below what you thought, and thank you so much for tuning in. We're finally done with Chimera Ant arc, and as soon as I can get to it, we will finish off these reviews with my review of the 13th Hunter Chairman election arc. Thank you all so much once again for tuning in, and for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.